Hello SGD, I've just hit 15,300 subs, so it's worth looking at these important numbers, and that very key number being 153. Very influential in the esoteric tradition. You'll find it especially in Christianity, one of those very important numbers, but in math and astronomy it's also one of these beautiful numbers, and it's embedded in architecture of multiple cultures as well, and really only accessible by using the ancient units of measure and how they connect to the supposedly modern scales. But let's begin. So 153. So especially in the Christians, you'll see this symbol, which is called the mandala, not to be confused with the mandala. Mandala means almond, so that's the name for it, and you'll find it in all sorts of forms across all sorts of churches going back a long time. Should I include that? I might come back to that, but now this will connect to, for instance, what they call the Jesus fish, which is this, you see it in stickers and attached to cars, that type of thing. Well, this is an actually very interesting symbol because it's the original symbol of Christianity, and here we can see how it fits in the flower of life. But now we have the two circles which form the vesica. Now that's an important feature because the vesica Pisces, or the vessel of the fish, or bladder of the fish as it's called in Latin, is also the shape from which the mandala arrives. And you'll see it in all sorts of different forms, again in all sorts of churches all over time. Now, how does that, well, that's one way it connects to the Jesus fish. And now what does it have to do with 153? We'll come to that in a moment. And I've just added the fish's tail there. So the vesica Pisces, or vesica piscis, is the bladder of the fish. Now that's, from there you can also get, the vesica is a great way of drawing Christian crosses as well. So the same geometry leads to many things, but the vessel of the fish, so the modern Jesus fish, but this is the Eclipse, the old original symbol of Christianity. So see there, and the fish being that original symbol, and it has a lot to do with the number 153. But from the vesica we get the seed of life, which leads to the flower of life, but the seed of life is just a series of vesica Pisces overlapping, another one each time the circle intersects. And there you can see how that Jesus fish symbol emerges from there. So the geometry of these things and their connection. So we have the miraculous draft of fishes. This is one of the key interesting stories in the Bible. Jesus tells them to pass out the net. That's in John 21. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. Now the connection between the net is another important one, but not for this video. He dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. So 153 fish. Isopsephy, which is this gematria. Now English is a different story. I got issues with that, but in Hebrew, Roman numerals are Roman letters, but also in Greek, numbers and letters were the same thing. And it's like, for instance, Mary Magdalene, her number would be 153. The Tetragrammaton appears in Genesis 153 times. So this connection with 153, Old Testament, New Testament, and for instance the Tetragrammaton, which is just so important in alchemical Hermetic traditions going back a long time ago. Now St. Paul's School, founded in London, founded in 1509. Originally the school provided education for 153 children of all nations and countries indifferently. This is an important, because this school, if you go to this school, you're basically, one of the who's who. The silver fish is the emblem of the school, and when the street number, so founded in 1509, when the street numbering was changed in 1884, it became 153 Hammersmith Road. Now, a standard in churches, but also ancient temples and cathedrals, was to embed key numbers and key measurements. And now, for instance, this is a church which is 153 feet high and 153 feet long. Also, the number 144 has great importance, and you'll find that in all sorts of churches, but 153 being these important numbers. Now, so when I first started and was looking into key places such as Rio de Janeiro, which is actually one of these esoteric cities, it's got a lot of the architecture and all these things, but the St. Peter Cathedral, 153 cubits high and 72 feet wide. Another important esoteric, religious, geometric, mathematical, metrological number. But 72 equals 288 palms. We'll come back to that, because it's not about 153. It's not about 108. It's not about 72 or 288. It's how these numbers interrelate. And this is just something that I keep mentioning, and whether it's ancient or modern architecture in these esoteric traditions. This is the Basilica of a Natural Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington. The meridian passes right through the front door, coincidentally, but the length of the cathedral, 495 feet, is 153 yards long. Now, the width of the dome, 108 feet, and the height of the tower, 240 feet, or 2,880 inches. So it's about how these numbers are embedded in architecture, ancient and modern, and repeated in there. So this is St. Philip's, York Street, Sydney, by James Blackett, very important master architect who did a lot of important cathedrals all around Australia. When I first started, this was, well, 104 feet didn't quite make sense to me, but it's only by applying, not only will you find that, the modern English foot has these measures in there, but you'll find how it's a matter of using ancient units of weights and measures, which for the most part in the scholarly work were only sort of rediscovered in recent times, yet these master architects were building it at such a point that we get these key features. So 102 feet. Well, 102 feet is 6.181818 imperial rods. Now that's on its own, but it's 17 fathom. Now that's it. We'll come back to that's the connection between 17 or 306 hands. 306 is 153 times 2, but if we convert it to the Doric, that's 1,530 Doric fingers, or 1,700 Ionic fingers. 153 and 17 in these connections now. So 306, 153 times 2. I'll revisit this in regards to ancient stone circles and other structures as well, which have a very key measurement, and how that converts to, for instance, 153 in the megalithic yard as well. But I'll do that separately, because this is, if you apply ancient measures, you just get the same harmonic, beautiful sets of numbers. So 153 and 17 connecting, 17 being 17 fathom, or 102 feet. Now again, back to the Masonic tradition, where the Doric, Ionic and Corinthian columns are so important, but not about it's not just about the column. It's the Greek schools of architecture, and Doric and Ionic are also very important ancient units of measurement. Now, staying with 102 feet, because I could do a long list of other structures, but let's, for instance, in ancient India, not quite ancient, but 1,020 years ago, one of these beautiful temples there, it's 102 feet wide and long, and 66 feet long and high, 102 feet and 66 feet as well. But so that gives us that same conversion, which is a nice relationship to the Fibonacci, but also to 153 and 17. In the Baha'i faith, this is the Baha'i temple here in Sydney, which is all by the beautiful numbers as well, but it's there are 71 hidden Arabic words, or 82 in Persian. Together that makes 153. The Guanyin of South Sea, it's 108 meters, but the pedestal is 45 meters. Now, I just mentioned 66, 153 in total, but the lotus is 66 feet high, and the pedestal is 82 feet high. Now, 66 feet, which is 792 inches. But even 82 feet, how that converts to 27.3. But the key thing being 153 for this point. But these beautiful measures that convert and give us all these lovely proportions of especially astronomy and just beautiful numbers in math and geometry. Sydney Masonic Centre has this, an installation, let's just call it. It's 9 panels high and 17 wide, so 153. And it's one of those connections as with the St. Philip's, leading us to via 17 and bringing us to 153, especially using the Doric and Ionic as seen on Mason tracing boards. Canberra is, along with Astana, Brasilia, Washington DC, Canberra is a very important, very special capital city in that it has the geometry, the measurements in the architecture, but also the legal status that it's just like Washington DC. Canberra is ACT, Australian Capital Territory. It's a separate district. Brasilia is literally called the Federal District. But without going the whole story of how they decided to make Canberra, the capital, just turns out that from Sydney to so Melbourne and Sydney were in competition who would be the capital. Eventually decided to sort of settle the issue, and it's 153 miles from Sydney, or 153,000 feet to Melbourne, and also interesting points in Melbourne as well. But the flagpole which sits over the centre, which even has the Templar cross built into the design, that's 265 feet high, and we'll come back to that because that's a very important feature. I.M. Pei, one of these key master architects who just embeds all these architecture with these symbols. Now the Louvre Pyramid, the argument over 666 is an interesting one as well, but of the sides that are not interrupted by the entrance, there are 153 rhombi on each side, and so there are 36 times 3 rhombi on these rhombi, then there are these triangles, and then how many rhombi are connect in them? Well, 15 on each, so that's 108 plus 45, so we have 153 rhombi that make up that design. In Bali, and so again it's cross cultures, cross religion, it is said that about 108 units of holy water and 45 units of holy water in sanctified effigies. Now 108 and 45 again together bringing 153. Could also do the 5, 12, 13 Pythagorean triangle, but I mentioned the Guan Yin, 108 feet statue on a 45-foot pedestal, 153. 153. Okay, now let's look at the beauty of 153 in the numbers, in the math. What makes 153 so special? When it comes to the math, 153 is also one of these standout beautiful numbers, and how it applies to the harmonics, ancient architecture, various religious traditions as well. So we'll go through a few of them. So now 153, it's the lowest narcissistic number, longer than 2 digits, and that is a number which is equal to the sum of each of its digits cubed. So 1 cubed plus 5 cubed plus 3 cubed equals 153. Now another unique thing about 153 is, so multiples of 3 below 2000 or 1998, it actually applies to higher ones as well, but not all of them. Now for instance, we take 363, it's divisible by 3. 3 cubed plus 6 cubed plus 3 cubed equals 270, or now 270, or 2 cubed plus 3 cubed equals 351. 351, 3 cubed plus 5 cubed plus 1 cubed equals 153. So numbers of 3 want to reduce to this number. So narcissistic number and how it connects to that particular way of looking at it. Now 153 is the 17th triangular number, so if you add up 1 plus 2 plus 3, etc., all the way up to 17, you get 153. And 153 is also a Harshad number. And a Harshad number is something that is divisible by its digits. So 1 plus 5 plus 3 equals 9. 9 times 17 is 153. So here we see this chart of multiplying 9s. The 17th multiplication of 9 is 153. 17th triangular number is 153. That's one of the beauties of in base 10, the number 9, and how it has these connections. Now in other bases such as base 12, 11 has the same magical properties that 9 has in base 10. So it's not, even though this connection with number 9 is an important one, that's in base 10, but in other bases, the 11 is 9 in base 12 in the way that it behaves the same. But 17th triangular number 153, 17 times 9 is 153, and 1 plus 5 plus 3 equals 9, so a Harshad number. Now also worth noting, if you add up the sums of the first 5, so instead of adding the triangular numbers, so we multiply them, so 1, and then 1 times 2, then 1 times 2 times 3, 1 times 2 times 3, and while you add up those you get 153. This is a lovely connection to the way that 288 and 33 works together. So it's, and triangular numbers connections to the tetractys or the tetragrammaton as well. But 17th triangular number 153, Harshad number 9, and 17 is 153. So there is a connection there. Now also this, so 33, 153, 273, they're all palindromes in binary, and there are also these other palindromes in higher numeration systems. But I compiled an updated an older series in regards to the pentagram and how this 33, 153, 273 connection comes in, especially if you look at it via examine the properties of the pentagram, and also religious architectural connections, astronomical connections, musical connections between these things. It's all related. But well, what is 17? 17 is also a binary, a palindrome in binary. Did I spell? Yep. So 10001, 17, 33 is 100001, 153 same backwards as forwards, and 273 as well. But again, now this connection between 153 and 17. Now think about it as a Pythagorean so how do you want to work out the square root of 153? Well, one way is to create a Pythagorean triangle with a 3 by 12 ratio. So 140, so 12 squared plus 3 squared equals a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we get square root of 153 from a 3 and 12 triangle, which we can reduce down to a 1 to 4 ratio, and 1 squared plus 4 squared equals 17. Therefore, a 1 to 4 right angle triangle will have the hypotenuse will be the square root of 17. Now that goes back to the Harshad number, so 1 plus 5 plus 3 is 9. 9 times 17 is 153, and 9 equals 3 squared, and because we're talking about Pythagorean triangles and squares, that's how we get that down there. It's a very lovely connection on its own, nothing too significant, but in the larger scale of things, as we saw with the architecture, such as the connection between 17 fathom or 306 hands, that's 153 times 2. But if we convert to using the ancient architectural esoteric occulted knowledge that's embedded across ancient weights and measures, 153 and 17, Doric and Ionic. The Doric represents the male, Ionic represents the female. Another beautiful thing about 153, and it's about how things are related to one another, not just on their own as well. So for instance, 153, as in the cube, a narcissistic number, being related to 288 in the third dimension. 2 to the third time plus 4 to the third plus 6 to the third is 288. 1 to the third plus 3 to the third plus 5 to the third equals 153. For more on that, I'll link this because it's very. If you approach this through a certain four-dimensional way, the harmonic numbers in the architecture will start to link. For instance, 432 and 440 numbers such as 369, and that relies on a multi-dimensional thinking, and especially the fourth dimension. And I believe that's another very important way to approach the Pythagorean harmonics. But sort of, because I mentioned the pyramid, well, the Grand Gallery, the top, the bottom, the floor of the Grand Gallery is 156 feet, but the ceiling of the Grand Gallery is 153 feet. By some, I prefer the 153.1 foot. It's the more modern surveys, and how that relates. So 153.1 times pi equals the height of a Great Pyramid. But worth mentioning, 153 in the pyramid, but how 288 and 153 are married in the third dimension. Even if you take the digits that make up 153 and all the variations and you add them together, for instance 666, 864, 288, 504, so the perfect Platonic number is 5040. Half of that would be 252, which relates to pentagon angles as well. But again, these particular sets of digits, how they interrelate to other important occulted, esoteric, architectural, mathematical traditions. Now, speaking of a number 288 in 4 dimensions, so 1 to the 4th times 8 or 2 to the 3rd, or 9 or 3 to the 2nd, 4 to the 1st is 288, but if you go across the opposite direction, the opposite diagonal, and add them together, you get 288. And also, we'll take that one, and 1 to the 1st times 2 to the 2nd times 3 to the 3rd is 108. So 288, 153 and 108, how they have these nice connections. So we go back and let's revisit, for instance, those churches. At 153 cubits high, 288 palms wide, and just so happens that on the Doric, again, the ancient measures, that's 1080 Doric fingers, 108, 253 and 288 coming together. The Basilica of the National Shrine, Immaculate Conception in Rome, 153 yards long, 108 feet wide and 2,880 inches. 288, 108, 153 again. Very clever boy. Now even so, back to I forgot one. So in the beginning I was talking about the Vesica Pisces, a fundamental geometric construction, literally book 1, proposition 1 of Euclid's Elements about making equilateral triangles. But the mandorla, the almond or the vessel of a fish, mathematically, geometrically speaking, it is precisely the square root of 3, but as a fraction, so in whole numbers, the best, simplest way to describe square root of 150, the square root of 3 as a fraction is 265 over 153. So we go back to the distances from the very esoteric, occulted city of Canberra, capital of Australia, just like Washington, Brasilia, Astana, Versailles, London, and the Vatican have these same architectural practices going in. It's not just about individual buildings, it's about the city plan. But 265 and 153 emerging there. I think that this, given the history and the connections and just the obvious measures and symbolism in the city of Canberra, that this was by design. But 265 over 153 is the square root of 3, and that emerges from this sacred emblem, the Vesica. I did include it. There you go there. So back to the Vesica as a symbol, but also as a geometrical mathematical construction, and the number 153. So back to this particular right angle triangle, and where we get the square root of 153. Why is that so special? 12.36931. Well, there are several different types of months. Basically, there are two groups. So there's the sidereal and there's the synodic. The synodic month is the one that you know. That's where the 30-day month calendar comes from, because every 29.53 days on average, we get a full moon. So the phases of the moon emerge from the the synodic month of 29.53. A synodic month is measured by how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth in relation to the sun. So that's the synodic month. It's a relationship of sun, Earth and moon. This is a month which is also responsible for solar eclipses as well. There's a nice vesica connection. So the vesica 153, also the symbolism of the solar eclipse, which is such a wonderful thing because the moon is 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun, but the sun is 400 times larger. It's just a amazing relationship, which is just so. The size of the moon to the Earth is rather weird and unique, and that this particular proportions between sun, Earth, and moon leading to the solar eclipse is almost like a 1 in a trillion or a zillion thing. If maybe doesn't happen anywhere else in our galaxy, possibly in the universe, we don't know. But from all the other moons and planets, the sun, Earth, moon relationship very freakish. But there are 29.53 days in a synodic month between full moons, 12.369 per year. So the square root of 153 is the number of full moons or synodic months per year. But that 29.53 day natural cycle of time, if we multiply the size of the diameter of the Earth times 29.53, we get the distance from the Earth to the moon as well. Another one of these lovely tie-ins. But so synodic months, full moons per year, 12.369. That's the square root of 153. Square root of 153 plus 1 equals the number of sidereal months per year. Synodic month is sun, moon, Earth relationship. The sidereal month is measured by one orbit of the moon around the Earth in relation to a star. Earth, moon, star, sidereal month. Sun, Earth, moon, synodic month. But plus 1, that's how many sidereal months per year. The one sidereal month, the Earth will travel through 26.999, but let's just round that off to 27 for the moment because that's the average. That's 27 degrees. Since it's creating a triangle, all the angles of all triangles add up to 180, so 27 minus 180 is 153, so angle A and B would add up to 153. This, of course, is by the 360 degree compass, but why do I have a 400 here? Well, that's the 400 gradient system. Now, this was a alternative to the 360 degree compass, an attempt to metricize the 360 degree compass. Luckily, it never took off, but instead of choosing 100 or 1,000, I think it's interesting that they chose 400 because of the 400 relationship of sun and moon in regards to the Earth leading to the eclipse. But if we go into the 400 gradient system instead of 360 degrees, well, then 27 degrees becomes 30 gradient, which means that instead of 153, we get 170, a nice connection to the 17 that we already mentioned earlier. So it's not about the number 153, it's about how it works together through ancient architecture, metrology, astronomy, geometry, mathematics, and traditions, and found in important religions, cross time, cross culture, across the world. Now, it's one, coincidences do happen, but there's also engineering and constants that are built into nature as well. Nature is not, you can say there are coincidences in nature, you can say that, and that would be correct by my knowledge. However, there are many things in nature that are not coincidences, and the way that the constants work together to hold things, it needs to be at this particular arrangement for that to happen, and that it would emerge in other forms and formats, and then that people would have noticed these forms and patterns in the past and put them together to embed this in knowledge. Maybe you can believe it's part of our DNA structure that we come to these things as well. But what's not is it's not just focusing on 153, it's how these work with one another. And again, I've done many videos and series talking about those other relate 108, 288, and these connections in there. So it's how these things work together. As I'm not a Pythagorean, strict speaking, but I believe there is interesting thoughts, interesting ways to perceive and possibly pursue certain things. And there is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. Our biggest failure is our failure to see patterns. So we have apophenia and pareidolia, which are tendencies to see patterns that do not exist. And this is often would be the, here's a nice fancy word for you, but there's also something called agnosia, which is also a real condition. It's the inability to recognize patterns. Now, J.E., anyway, those initials, I got it, the way YouTube works and stuff, but just in some prisoner famously hung himself. Yes? And that's agnosia if you believe that he was not snuffed out. And this is there is conspiracy theory. You can take it way too far, but there's also coincidence theory, and you can take that way too far. And both of them are essentially ideologies that people tend to grab onto. You're either with team conspiracy or with team coincidence, and you tend to stay with that and not to look out. It's very much like our partisanship in politics. The other party is bad no matter what they do. My party is always good, or vice versa. But even if I can't prove either way, I don't know how you could, but even if these patterns are coincidental, and I think, well, okay, best of luck to you, at the very least these patterns again do form a lovely way of learning and memorizing and exploring things as well. And again, if this was taught in school in a more interesting way, so instead of just teaching music class and you go off to science class and then you go to math class, but if this was brought together, how much, I can't see a downside to it. You could probably find one, but what is the upside of the educational system we have now? And if you want to argue for that the modern system, way we do things, rather than going through through the liberal arts and that type of method, I don't think that there is no argument. This is beautiful, it's interesting, and it's got me interested in studying these things because of that. I can't prove it either way. It hasn't changed my life in any earth. There hasn't been a beam of light and some revelation or enlightenment, but it has made study interesting for me. And so instead of being a spectator, I'm now a participant. And if there's a meaning of life, it's do not be a spectator. Have a go, have a look at things, and you don't have to do expressly sacred geometry, but whatever you do in life, don't be a spectator, and don't follow one side blindly either way. So with that 153, how this connects to all these other things, metrology, natural cycles, and that's important. It's also in there are natural elements to it, not designed by man, but built into nature, and on a way of interpreting and understanding at least the architecture, historic but also ancient architecture, and these concepts of putting in these proportions and these numbers. This is not pareidolia. That is pareidolia. It is a fact that they did this. This is spoken about. It was insisted upon, and again you can even find it in ancient texts as well that they speak of such things. So 153, just one. You can pick your number: 108, 273, 432. And you can if you just pursue that number through, what you will learn about the quadrivium, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, and music it's beneficial. It can't hurt. Gather all the knowledge you can. It costs nothing and is no weight to bear.